After studying this module, you shall be able to known about legal aspects of visual evidences and learn about computer generated images. Now, introduction. Because it is often impractical, if not possible, to take the jury to the scene of the crime or incident, the next best alternative is to bring the scene into the courtroom. For more than a century, the best method has been photographic documentation of the scene. Forensic photography is the accepted methodology, and because of its success, the legal foundation for admissibility has been significantly simplified. There are two basic requirements for the admissibility of photographs. First, someone must have personal knowledge to testify as to the accuracy of the depiction of the subject in the photograph. Second, someone must identify the equipment used as well as its capability of producing a true and accurate representation. In recent years, it has been my experience that this process has become less complex. Generally, all that is required is confirmation by a witness that he saw the object or subject at the scene, and further that the photographic documentation is a fair and accurate representation. Now, historical foundation. For the most part, the requirement for accurate photographic representation includes photographs, slides, videotapes, movies, and X-rays. The acceptance of this broad medium as evidence in court has been well established. The first photographs daguerreotypes were used in a civil case by the Supreme Court in Lucy versus United 23 Howard 515 in 1859 to decide the authenticity of photograph in comparing signatures. The first recorded criminal case introducing photographs as identification evidence was Oder Zook versus Commonwealth 76 PA 340 in 1874. Color photographs were introduced in civil litigations in Green versus City and County of Denver 3 Colonu 390 142p 2D 277 in 1943, involving color photographs of spoiled meat in violation of the health ordinance prohibiting the sale of putrid meat to the public. Criminal cases have shown the importance of color since the 1960s. In a case that depicted the graphic wounds of the victim, State versus County 157 connected 209 251A 2D 81 in 1968. Slides have been notable State versus Shepherd case 100 Ohio App 34.1 128 Northeast 2D 471 1 upheld in rehearing 352 US 955 in 1956. Color slides depicted the victims. Motion pictures were accepted in 1916. Duncan versus Kinger 6 Ohio App 57. The use of videotapes as evidence of defendants' statements and confessions has been upheld as clearly as 1969. Paramore versus State 229 S 855 FLA in 1969. Now, the accuracy of color. The true color reproduction may be a point of contention if the color is a critical issue. Questions may be directed at the lighting, filters and processing, any or all of which can alter color balance. Use of a standard color balance bar in the corner of the photograph allows comparison with the original bar used to produce the photograph. Alterations of negatives and prints, any deliberate attempt to alter the photographic evidence is exhaustible and, to the untrained eye, difficult to detect. Usually, the deception is one of the two types. One is eliminating evidence such as scars, cracks, or defects from photographs by filtering. The second is through the use of double exposure. Objects or people can be added to a photograph with multiple negatives. Careful scrutiny of the highlights and shadows in the photograph or negative can reveal these attempts at deception. Now, computer generated images. Today's computer technology brings with it new enhancement capabilities to apply problems photograph. It also brings the chance of misunderstanding because of many individuals' fear of the unknown. It is imperative that supporting testimony from the computer imaging expert provides the proper foundation for acceptance of this type of evidence. Now, inflammatory photographs. Photographic documentation that shows graphic details of gruesome wounds, injuries, or deceased victims may raise objections on the grounds that it may prejudice the jury. The relevancy and factual content are important to the admissibility of graphic photographic evidence. Nudity is another area where proper foundation will avoid unnecessary objections. In a series of rape assaults on college women, the photographic documentation of puncture wounds to the breast was admissible based on the fact that the weapon, a sharp screwdriver, is responsible for wounds inflicted on 4 different women was a common modus operandi of the defendant. Marking photographs. The use of a particular photograph to emphasize a point with more than one witness is often done by marking the photograph. Thus, marks may consist of lines, arrows, numbers, circles, and so forth to draw attention to a particular point in a paragraph. To preserve the integrity of the photograph, it may be helpful to use clear acetate overlays on which the witness can make their marks. Another method would involve duplicate points of the subject on to be used for marking by the witness. Another type of mark that may be objectionable is a deficit in the negative that produces artifacts on the point. These marks can appear on light or dark spots on even clouded images. If the photograph is critical, it will be necessary to produce the negative for review by your advisories. The computer, their argument that is not a true and accurate representation. You might point out that no photograph is an exact representation considering that it is only two-dimensional. Now, misleading photographs. In addition to objections that arise over color, optical distortions, markings or time-lapse are several other areas relevant to objectionable contents of photographic documentation. Some photographs may be confusing to a jury if necessary or irrelevant objects are crowding the photograph. Likewise, if the photograph is taken too close, segregating the object from the rest of the scene, it can be just as misleading. Therefore, it is suggested that additional overall photographs be taken for orientation to the overall picture. A single photograph portraying one point of view, particularly when related to subject material over a period of time, could be misinterpreted by jury. For example, an intersection where a pedestrian vehicle accident occurred as shown in a photograph as having relatively high pedestrian traffic. The correct photographic series shows that actual time frame when the incident occurred some 3 to 4 hours later than the single photographs of the same intersection. Photocopies, sometimes referred to as laser copies, produced on color photocopying machines appear as very good likeness at first glance. However, the limited quality of color shading is most noticeable, and the paper, typically bond, cannot compare with photographic paper. Now, optical illusion. Avoid using excessively wide angle lenses greater than 28 mm, which create fishbowl distortions at the edges of photographs. Telephoto or zoom lenses are useful in many instances. For example, in surveillance where close-up identification is desirable, but subjects in the foreground must be avoided, as they can detract from the objective by appearing closer in the photograph than they actually were. Also consider the composition of your photograph in relation to accuracy. Vertical lines will appear longer than horizontal lines of the same length. Lighter shade objects will appear larger than dark objects. If the photograph is to fall within the guidelines of a true and accurate representation, do not let distortion distract from your objective to present the truth. Now, scale of reference. When the photographic evidence portrays size or distance, it suggested that two photographs of the same subject be taken, one as it is found and second with a scale of reference. The scale can be a standard ruler, yardstick, tape measure, or specially designed rule, usually 6 to 7 inches in length, marked in both inches and millimeters and blue or gray in color. A scale of reference photographed with bloodstain evidence is far more effective in differentiating between high velocity, diameter less than 1 millimeter, and cast of blood spatter. Now, sight perspective. If the photograph depicts an observation made by a particular witness, be sure the photograph was taken from that person's perspective. It is important to take the photograph as near as possible to the same angle and eyesight level as the witness. This is particularly important in motor vehicle accidents in which the sight perspective of a driver or pedestrian can be very important because of any obstructions. Now, time frame. The lapse of time between the event and when the photographs were taken is subject to objection based on time of day, weather conditions, time of year, or changes of appearance in the scenes caused by actions of individuals, moving furniture in a room, construction or demolition of buildings, etc. If a substantial period has elapsed, additional care may be required to lay the foundation for admission of the photographs as relevant. The witness must show that the photograph is fair and accurate in aiding his testimony. Now, the presentation strategy. The primary purpose of photographic evidence is to aid the jury in relating witness testimony to other forms of physical evidences. The objective in preparing demonstrative evidence for court is to have it viewed by jurors while testimony is given. All too often, the photographic evidence is taken for granted, and the normal 3:5 prints are passed among the jurors during testimony. Not only is this confusing to the jurors, but it can be very distracting to the witness. There are several alternative techniques to maximize the effectiveness of photographic evidence. Enlargements are routinely accepted. Occasionally, a juror will stop for a moment or ask to point out the subject addressed. Such evidence stays with them long after you have left the courtroom and they have retired to deliberate. The original print and sometimes negatives should also be available for comparison of content and accuracy. An alternate technique with enlargements is to mount poster size photographs on a stiff backing material from corkboard, illustration board and display them on an easel near the jury. The witness can then direct jurors' attention to points of interest during testimony. The disadvantage is the lack of personal contact with the jury developed with the previous technique. Presentation of slide transparencies in court has become widely accepted. The advantage of a large photograph directing everyone's attention is to one visual display at a time may be overweight by problems with courtroom dynamics. Older courtrooms may not allow adequate darkening for proper viewing of slides. More recent courtrooms design, however, has provided for proper room darkening as well as strategically mounted screens for optimum viewing. An important footnote to proper preparations is always have a backup projector and spare bulbs for the unexpected failure. One additional suggestion for the convenience of the viewers: have a set of prints made from the slides that can be passed around later during deliberation. Modern photographic documentation brings the technology of videotape into the courtroom with ever increasing frequency and great success. When properly prepared and introduced, nothing is closer to the truth than a moving documentation, particularly with audio backup. It is as close to lifelike as our technology has come, keeping everyone's attention directed to one subject at the same time. The latest introduction to the field of demonstrative evidence is computer graphic enhancement of photographic images. This technique, while relatively new in its application to the area of forensic photography, has been accepted in several judicial proceedings. It is important to lay proper foundation for the accuracy of the work and the expertise of the individual who produced the work. The three-dimensional capabilities of this medium hold tremendous promise for the areas of accident and crime scene reconstruction. This author and associates are presently involved in researching and collecting data for potential use of this technique in fire scene reconstruction. Now, the summary. The technology of modern photographic equipment has significantly reduced the margin of error in producing court acceptable photographs. If you read the owner's manual provided with camera, use the suggested film speed ISO and practice, you should encounter little concern about the acceptability of your work in court. There are times and situations where special techniques for photographing evidence may require additional testimony to lay the foundation for its admissibility. The need may arise for additional explanation of methodology, equipment, and technical experience. This is often the case with techniques such as microscopy, macrophotography, ultraviolet photography, photogrammetry, and videography. When properly prepared and introduced, nothing is closer to the truth than a moving document, particularly with audio backup. It is as close to lifelike as our technology has come, keeping everyone's attention directed to one subject at the same time.